of September last year, you spoke about illegal structures. Since then, the city has taken action against illegal property owners and their buildings. What is the current status quo?
We are happy with the work that we have done along those lines, in particular with the establishment of the project called MMC.
Yeah, but
where is it? Because there's
They are from Malawi. Malawians. Oh, so how much do you pay rent up? Plus minus, how much do you pay? Yeah? Rent.
Do you know what language do you speak? French.
How much do you guys pay for this one?
MMC is going to really become the order of the day in the city of Johannesburg. You are aware 1,500 police officers are undergoing training. They'll be ready later this year. So you can imagine the size of our JPD by the end of this year will be double the size, so that it can allow us to have the capacity to deal with this lawlessness that's really been going on in our city. So the guys that you're writing everything we take. Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the aspects that has been done there is to disconnect those people who are connecting to the systems illegally. But as well, what other thing that we are doing is to try and get our municipal courts working properly, so that we don't have to take all our cases through the normal court systems, which takes longer. So we are hopeful with the municipal courts, if they start functioning properly, we'll then be able to deal even effectively with these illegal buildings that are upgoing in our city in various places.
Now, how are these illegal structures impacting on your planning as a city along what used to be called the corridors of freedom?
You know, when people or developers or everyone doesn't follow what its intended purpose or the intended planning of the city, they just create havoc, so to say. You know, the initial plan of the development along the corridors, which the original intention of that was transit-oriented development, which means that the intention was to create development around a transport system. That's why we developed the rear via system in the city of Johannesburg. So the nature of the development that we require are those that talk to that initial idea that we had as a city, to say that we want to move people and to move cars. So the development that we require in those places are development that talks to that, because we want people to work, play, and live within areas of transportation. So it's not merely about having just student accommodation along those corridors. We're talking of developments where people are able to come to the transport system, which is a bus, and they travel to their destinations of work. Or some development that also talks to opportunities of businesses, because we talk of people working and play. So we have seen so much development only focusing along those corridors, in particular to student accommodation, which is not the intended purpose of this. As I said, the initial plan was transit-oriented development, which is that bring people closer to the transport modes, allow high density along those lines, and as development goes, and it allows gradual increase into the suburbs of those neighboring areas. So that's the intention of this. But with this illegality that keeps on coming in, that's why we then have created policies that talks to the development that are happening that in those areas. We have now currently what is called a nodal review policy that talks to how we look at all the developments in those areas, and so that we guide the developers to say that this is the type of development that we want. It's not only just merely development focusing on the corridors, but how do we then develop on the suburbs that surrounds the corridors, where our people want to get to stay in these places, but because of those unscrupulous developers or these unscrupulous landlords that have these buildings and turn them into not the intended uses, makes our people to then come and stay in these illegal buildings and the legal connections and all of these things, which have an impact on the infrastructure and the special planning that we intend to achieve as a city.
How will developers who are currently building illegal infrastructures be dealt with?
Yes.
In accordance with what the city had in mind in terms of the building codes of that specific area?
Yes. These developers, some of them, or these landlords that come into those buildings, they do not now follow our rules, because they are driven by profit, some of them. Others that are driven by opportunism. So then it makes them not to follow the legal processes. So with us introducing all of these policies, with us limiting, controlling how this development helps, it then helps us to look into issues of infrastructure, help us to look in issues of open spaces, how we deal with recreational facilities, schools, and all of these things, because that's what talks to the entirety of development. Because now what's keep on happening, the illegalities have an impact on the infrastructure and have an impact on the neighborhood as a whole. Because if you just keep on bringing high people without considering the other areas of development, you put so much burden on the infrastructure that is there. Whereas the city must grow gradually, but that will only happen when people comply with the rule of law.
So at the end of the day, what sort of developers do you want to attract?
The development that we're looking for as a city, we're saying that bring, yes, high density to a particular level in accordance with our zoning rights that are given in those areas. But it's just not only student accommodation, it's just not only high residential buildings only, but we're also focusing on the development of the entire suburbs of the areas, because we're saying that bring work businesses in those areas. I will say to developers, as much as we are developing these buildings, also allow for an affordable accommodation in that space of development of about 30% minimum that we want of affordable accommodation in those developments. So that's the type of development that we're looking for, not just mainly focusing only on the corridors only, but as we go into the suburbs, let's look at what else are needed there. Is it job opportunities? How do we bring businesses in there that suit the neighborhood? Recreational facilities, open spaces, health, heritage areas. So that's the type of development that we are looking at, but not just mainly focusing only on student accommodation. That's what we have seen in many of our developments, but that's the engagement that we are having with developers to try and address these issues.
Hi, I'm Jen Su, and you're watching Joburg Today.